Okay, in a related issue, there were a series of issues and conversations that happened when the spoken word organization Button Poetry began to move into the Twin Cities. And Tish and TruArtSpeaks had some issues with that. So this is a related issue about accessibility, about issues of power. So I'm going to ask Tish to just talk about the background to that, and then, you know, your reactions to it and what you feel are the lessons or principles or things, issues we need to think about coming out of that issue.
I want to give Button Poetry their due diligence that some of the folks who put in work at Button Poetry are St. Paul residents and Minneapolis residents. So it isn't necessarily that they were outsiders that came into the space. It is that Button Poetry is known primarily for the work that they do online in showcasing slam poetry, right? So they go to events and do the thing and then upload it to YouTube. And so part of the qualm at the time was that Button had been in relationship with this community for a very, very, very long time. Button had ties to some of the folks that gave us at this table our start, right? They also assisted Button in their upbringing. They too are, their management or their admin is very young. So part of what it was an erasure, which happens a lot when you're talking about issues of white supremacy and white privilege and people of color and, you know, community, right? So part of the issue on our end was an erasure of folks in this town who had also extended a hand of and an opportunity and an ask for collaboration. So that was there was an open invitation to work together on initiatives and to support one another. And instead of making that decision, Button Poetry chose to do their thing independent, and the conversation never ended. So it was sort of this is interesting because there's not really a politically correct way to give the background of this story. You know what I mean? So that's also a thing that I have to say. I'm trying to sift through the words of, like, how do you say somebody, like, backdoored and, like, hit your partners up, like, can we partner? You know what I mean? Like, so what it was literally, like, the timetable is like, hey, you know, we're thinking about doing this thing. Hey, don't do that thing. Let's partner, let's work together, because together we can be really effective. And this is, like, some of the work that we're already doing with the population that you desire to serve, and we're already trained. You won't need to go train other people to figure out how to work across cultural differences. But that's not the decision that their administration went with. And that's also not what they communicated. And then there was a lot of, so the way we first found out that they had decided to move forward with the initiative was through our partners, who they had solicited to work with them, our partners. So that felt, you know, like, ew, you know? But then, so it was an erasure of, like, years and years and years of this work, though, as well, and years and years of partnerships as well, right? So, like, Central Touring Theater, the Minnesota Spoken Word Association, and sort of how we were, how TruArtSpeaks was gifted with sort of our biggest program, which is Be Heard, was through, like, a cultural practice, you know? E.G. Bailey, Shay Cage, Melissa Borgman, Dudley Boyd started, you know, they were the folks who got the buzz, right, around really holding down the youth spoken word movement in the Twin Cities a while ago, with the help of Diego Vasquez Jr., Carolyn Holbrook, and a handful of other folks, right? These folks were like, yo, this wonderful opportunity is happening, let's make it happen. And for years, those 4 individuals maintained it. When they no longer were running the program, it was a baton passing thing that happened. It was like, okay, here are the tools, here are the connections, here are the resources. This is how we want this program to continue to exist in our community. Let us know what you need. And everybody shows up and gives back, right? So it was also an erasure of all of that because of the power that Button has. So it's also about those sorts of dynamics. Again, there's not really a political way to say this, but, you know, like, everyone, the administrative staff at Button Poetry is white. All white. Button Poetry is mega palatable. TruArtSpeaks is not. it, maybe they are. You know what I mean? Like, but it's like, it's interesting, man, because I was with a couple of my mentors a couple weeks ago, and 40-year-old white guy and a 40-year-old black guy. And the 40-year-old black guy's like, I can't ask for money. He has to ask for money. If I go and ask somebody for money, I'm begging for it. If he goes and asks somebody for money, he's telling them what they need to invest in. Mm. That's the button poetry shit, really. We've been doing this work, and you know what I mean? So it was part of that. It was also really the misappropriation of people's images, yo. Like, that was a really whack aspect of what happened with button poetry. They used a teaching artist's image in this field and portrayed him as a student and did so without his permission, and he was the poster boy for their program, and that was really problematic. But then also, really, it was symbolic. It's symbolic of things that happen in this community. It's symbolic of a big fish eat little fish, and we're a really palatable organization, and we have all this money, and yeah, you've been doing it for a long time. We really like your model. We're gonna look at it, figure out how to do it, and do it because we can get the bread for it. And bye. And we were like, oh, that's whack. And I think was really important, and a thing that didn't come out at the conversation was before we decided, in terms of our practice, internally, it's like a unilateral redistribution of power. We have arts organizing and activism background, so we don't really do the whole totalitarian dictator ED thing. It's a thing, but it's not a thing. We talk, we sit at a table together, and we make decisions as a collective because we believe in each other, and we really are a family in terms of the way we make choices. So I'm saying that to say, we also didn't do anything before we spoke to the young people we work with. We didn't write a letter, we didn't send a tweet, we didn't call a meeting, we didn't make a phone call or respond to emails from our partners until we spoke to the young people. We said, hey, here's what's cracking. This is the end goal of, literally just a timeline. Here's a timeline, we're gonna put it on the wall. This is what has happened. Here's potentially what could happen, benefits. This is what could be the opportunity of this thing. And this is also what could be a consequence of this thing. We went through Liz Lerman's critical response, which we adapted from Minneapolis Public Schools. We went through that shit. So we were like, boom, look at this thing. What do you notice? How does it make you feel? What questions do you want to ask? What does it remind you of? Speculate the intent. It was a teachable moment, and we use it as a teachable moment. That's literally what happened. We called a meeting with the youth. And the youth were it was 2, maybe 3 hours of conversation and questions and feelings and emotions. And the last thing that they said was, yeah, we got to do something about this. And they told us what to do. And there was some maneuvering because we also had to make sure that we kept them safe. So part of the community dialogue that we had, we never put none of the youth on Front Street. The questions and the concerns that were the youth's, we didn't put them in a place where they could be attacked in that meeting. So we took a lot of heat and weight, also advocating for the young people that we work with and putting their concerns first. And not, had they said, let's make it pop, then, maybe I wouldn't be on this panel right now. But that's not what the young people's authentic and honest and natural response was to that. They too saw all of the, invisibility being rendered. They too saw all of the marginalization being rendered, the dominant narrative being perpetuated at home.
We're going to open up for questions near the end, but Dinas, did you want to say anything about? Because you sort of raised your hand. You said I could.
I was maybe more of a moment of moral support.
Okay. All right. Guante or Shava, do you want to pick up on any of this? What either Tish or Sean have talked about?
Y'all are good. That's just